All right, so we were going to go live, but if we go live on some of the podcasting sites, we'll definitely get censored by just probably the backsplash of the person I'm interviewing screen. But regardless of that, we do hope people listen. We do hope people listen to us on the radio. On the podcasting sites, we can get this on. We do hope people listen to that. Subscribe, like, share. Texans for vaccine choice. Rebecca Hardy, the leader, the champion in Texas, fighting against the liberal psychos that are trying to take over Texas. She's on here again talking about what happened in all the elections, state house, state senate, the U.S. Senate in Texas, and obviously the presidency. And everything else in the kitchen sink in politics we'll talk about. Rebecca, it's always a pleasure to see your face, have you on, and I love our conversations.
Rob, it's been a while. I was excited to get your text, and it's time for a Texas update on your show here. So I'm happy to be here.
Right. Well, before we even get into Texas, let's just quickly dabble into the presidential election fast. With with that said, I want to talk about President Trump. Seven swing states, won them all, did extremely well with Hispanics, young women, young men. Also won some big referendums, I would say, in the state of Florida for the Republican Party, for abortion, for marijuana, which didn't pass in Florida. I was extremely surprised by that. But what was your take on President Trump's win? Did you see that coming, or was that something that you were nervous about?
That is a perfect question to kick us off here, Rob, because I'll tell you, I try to be very aware of, I'm in the political circle. I assume that I have a very loud echo chamber, and I am always concerned. Almost, perhaps this election showed me that I am almost overly cautious of confirmation bias and assuming that I have an echo chamber because I honestly, moving into Tuesday, was not optimistic because I am so sensitive of is this just my echo chamber talking, or is this truly America talking? I don't ever really know. So it was good. So when I saw all the, I turned off my laptop probably around 2 a.m. Kind of halfway in his President Trump's victory speech, what have you. And it wasn't until he got to 280 on the website that I was watching that I was like, okay, I feel like I can close this laptop and be okay with this because
Mhm.
I just didn't, I honestly didn't know. I really didn't know going into Tuesday night if we had this or not. And it was such a referendum. And it was great because I had kind of course corrected overly the other side and I was happily surprised.
Well, let's talk about Texas because Senator Cruz, who you guys, I believe, endorsed, did win a pretty resounding victory over a person that likes men and women sports and other crazy things with Colin Alred. With that said, was that pretty much, because the mainstream media was saying that this was something that was extremely close. I found that very far-fetched from the start. Was that something that you saw coming that, Cruz was going to win a resounding victory, or was that kind of nervousness as well?
Another terrific question. So let me just give you a little bit of historical context and why perhaps the mainstream media has a leg to stand on about how potentially close this race would have been. And that is in 2018, the last
That
time
O'Rourke.
that Cruz was up for reelection was when Beto O'Rourke challenged him. And I mean, that was a 2 point victory in 2018.
Yeah.
And so all of us, I mean, there was a handful of like almost heart attacks that night when we were seeing the returns come in and back in 2018. So we were optimistic just as far as some of the internal polling and such that we were getting, but it was not a race that anybody was taking for granted for sure. And so when those returns came up and it was a near double digit margin of victory, we all took a very big, deep breath. So, yes, the mainstream media got it wrong. They got it epically wrong, but there was a little bit of historical context there with his previous close, much, much closer campaign in 2018.
Rebecca Hardy, Texans for Vaccine Choice. Rebecca, let's talk about this. Obviously, you endorsed a lot of candidates as well in the Senate, in the House. This is the state Senate and the state House for the state of Texas. A lot of them won. I believe only you said one or two lost. And these are all people that are very good on, choice, freedom, and what, this country is supposed to be about, but unfortunately it's not right now. Talk a little bit about that and how that can develop, God willing, into pushing Greg Abbott on some of these issues of vaccine choice that we've seen, demolished from 2020 and beyond.
Great question. So, yes, we had a very robust voter guide for this general election. In Texas, I'm not sure how this is in other states. I assume it's relatively similar that the way the districts are drawn, be it a congressional seat or a state house or a state Senate seat, most of the districts are drawn either solidly blue or solidly red. And so this is just my plug for why primaries are far more important than the general election, because I would say 95% of those elections were decided back in Texas it's March in the primary, because just the way the districts are drawn, they're gerrymandered kind of to be very R or very D. And so we were optimistic that most of our people would win. You are right. Of I can't remember exactly how many people were on our voter guide, around 50, I believe. Only one lost. And even that race, it was a stretch. That race, we knew it was probably a stretch, but we were optimistic. We really didn't know how much Trump and Cruz would impact the down ballot. So we just had one L from our entire voter guide. But what is significant as far as the trends in Texas, and that is that the Republicans gained, we flipped 2 seats in our Texas House, and these were both border districts. So one in Corpus Christi, one in Uvalde. Those were 30-year Democrat-held Texas House seats that are now held by a Republican. Even more significantly, though, is our flipped state Senate seat. We had a Democrat down on the border who she actually sat on our HHS committee in our Texas Senate, and she hated every single good bill that she saw. Never met a vaccine mandate she didn't love. And so the last time around, this was an open seat. It was a contest between this individual and another man. She ended up being the victor. He challenged her again, and by 3,000 votes came out the victor. So we flipped a state Senate seat, which is great. Even though we have a good margin in our state Senate, we do have a couple of senators that can get a little soft around the edges. My personal state senator and the state senator for Texans for Vaccine Choice, because we are a Tarrant County nonprofit, is horrible on this issue. And he is a Republican. And he's decided that if you need a transplant to live, you should be force mandated. And it has gone on the record with such. So we still have an uphill battle in Texas, but the overall victories in Texas that we saw all of our Supreme Court judges win. We saw lots of courts flip in Dallas County, and then the Texas House and Texas Senate races. I mean, I'm just optimistic. I really am. I feel like we will just be riding this Maha momentum even at the state level across the nation.
I want you to go a little bit more in depth on the Democrats, how they've moved from Oregon, Washington, California to Texas during COVID, maybe even a little bit before COVID, and how they've really taken over the medical establishment in Texas, where everybody thinks Texas is such a red state. It is a red state, but it's turning more purple, especially in the medical field.
You were just asking the best questions, Rob. You're my favorite interviewer. You're absolutely right. Well, I will tell you this. As far as the medical refugees that we're seeing in Texas, the vast majority of them understand the assignment, that they are not going to vote for what they fled. they arrive here, they're ready to kind of enter into the what they believe to be the motherland of, medical freedom. Most of them are shocked to see just how of a uphill battle we have even in Texas to preserve these basic rights of vaccine choice and, medical liberty. But thankfully, most of them, it's not the new voters from out of town, from out of state that are turning Texas purple. It just, that's not what the stats show. There
Okay.
are other people moving to Texas. We have the medical refugees or I'm fleeing my blue state and I understand the assignment refugees, but then we have people that are just moving to Texas because their company is relocating here for, whatever the tax breaks or whatever, because it's a much more friendly environment to do business in. And those individuals are the ones that we see not they're trying to bring their blue policies here to Texas, and that's where I get a little twitchy about it, but it's okay. But yes, to your point though, we do have like our Texas Medical Board. Those individuals are appointed by our Republican governor, but the
Right.
TMB, that's the board that has gone after Dr. Mary Talley Bowden,
Yep.
has gone after some of these very outspoken doctors that had the big sin of not going along with the narrative. And so this is a problem, and it's a big problem in Texas.
So obviously, Ken Paxton, for people that know, has really pushed hard against the mandates, pushed hard against Pfizer. I know he was last time I heard, and you can go deeper into this because you're in the state and this is your bread and butter. Ken Paxton was pushing against Pfizer to try to, and I don't know the correct terminology or information, but to try to find out about these vaccine mandates, what was in the COVID-19 vaccine,
Yep.
almost maybe looking into banning it. Along with there was actually some other people. I think there was a attorney general in Kansas as well. And obviously we know the situation in Florida, which God knows what the hell's happening over there. It's come to a halt in my mind and from what I've heard. Regardless of that, can you give us an update about what's going on with Ken Paxton? Because it seems like Governor Abbott is on a different page as far as the vaccine issue than Ken Paxton, the attorney general, is.
Yes. So, okay. So Ken Paxton, let's just be clear. This week, I believe I just saw, it was it yesterday or Friday, where he filed his 100th lawsuit against the Biden administration. So there is no bigger fighter than Ken Paxton in the United States pushing against this administration that has tried their best to stomp on everybody's rights. So hat tip to Ken Paxton. I was texting with some friends over the weekend about if he is or is not going to join the Trump administration, and I just said this seems inevitable, but selfishly, I just want him to stay in Texas. We need him here. But to your point, there was a big headline late last week about the Kansas Attorney General filing this lawsuit against Pfizer for these deceptive trade practices. And I love that this is getting back into the ether of our nation. But I just want to remind everybody, Ken Paxton filed this deceptive trade practices lawsuit over a year ago. So it is important for us to keep the gas on with all of these. I want them scrambling. It's going to take more than just Ken Paxton. So Kansas AG, welcome to the battle. And because we really do need everybody, every voice, kind of rowing their oars towards this accountability and transparency from the pharmaceutical companies.
What legislation are you guys going to be pushing in the session? Because it is very hard, obviously, is in Texas, but in any state to get something done on the medical freedom, any kind of vaccine or any kind of issue with medical freedom in general, because the pharmaceuticals companies have so much of their tentacles in these state legislators, in the
Yeah.
Congress, in the U.S. Senate, and obviously with the presidency as well.
Yes. So just as a reminder, though, in 2023, Texans for Vaccine Choice ushered 5 standalone vaccine
Right.
choice bills over the finish line. So that really was historic. I will tell you, we are definitely going to be I mean, our legislative agenda is very aggressive. But I was telling a partner last week that, that somebody that partners with us, I was like, listen, let's pretend that we can pass this entire legislative agenda. What that will do is basically clear off the top shelf of tyranny and allow the second level of stuff to rise up so that we can tackle again the next time around. And it's funny that we landed on this day to make this recording, Rob, because today is the very first day of bill filing for the Texas legislature, this upcoming legislative session. It's called pre-filing. And so just the last time I checked, it was maybe about an hour ago, we were already tracking 14 good bills that have been filed on our behalf in the first few hours of pre-filing. There's 3 bad bills that we will kill. We have a 100% success rate of killing all bad bills that would infringe on Texans' rights. But I am hopeful that we will get some of these good bills over the finish line. These are bills that would allow parents to print exemption forms from home. Right now in Texas, it is this bureaucratic process where you have to submit your request and then they mail you a hard copy affidavit to turn into the school after you get it notarized. I mean, it's just this weird, bizarre system. I'm kind of like, excuse me, 1999 called and wants their hard copy mailed system back. Like it is time for us to usher Texas into internet. Every time I have to request those affidavits, I always say to myself, if it pleases the queen, may I please have my forms to opt my kids out of optional medical procedures? It's just so dumb that we have to. I mean, it's a hoop. It's a barrier to free exercise of religious freedom or just liberty in general, really. So that's a big one. Keeping in mind, Texans for Vaccine Choice, I mean, we have our eye on a Texas where you don't need a magical paper to opt out of vaccination, right?
Right.
There is no other medical procedure where you have to sign a paper saying, I don't want it. You simply just say no, right? So, I just want to highlight that for your listeners in that it is always this kind of balancing act that we have to do each session of what's the strongest bill that we can file that also has the chance of passing. And so this is what we would call kind of a stepping stone bill, as far as like, okay, at the minimum, just let us print them from home, like instead of having to enter all this personal data into your little web request form and then get them mailed to us. So there's that. The other thing that we are going to be really pushing hard on is a full protection of our medical students. Anybody that wants to pursue healthcare, healthcare studies in Texas there's essentially no opt out. And we passed SB7 and SB29. I'm not even talking about the COVID vaccine. I'm talking about all of them. There's a lot of mandated vaccines for our healthcare students. And so we are going to, and that it's really, I just want to highlight that issue because the entire system is set up to propagate itself, right? Like the whole healthcare system desperately needs people that believe in informed consent, that believe in patient-centered care, that believe in non-mandated medicine. But the entire system is set up to churn out compliant robots. Well, I had to comply. I had to have these mandated vaccines. And so by the time they get out of medical school, having complied their way through with the textbooks written by the pharmaceutical companies, it churns it by design, it churns out these doctors that are not interested in any of the things that we care about. And so if we can provide a level of exemptions for our healthcare students, that is probably my biggest priority because that is the phone call I get. I mean, last week I probably got this phone call, and when I say phone call, I mean email or message, all that. Yeah. 3 times in 1 week. And that's just a snapshot in time of, these kids not being able to pursue their dream because of these mandated jabs.
And not only that, we need doctors, we need nurses, people in the medical profession in general. They're trying to get people from overseas to come to this country that are in the medical field because we don't have as many people as we need. as far, we have a very large elderly population. There's going to be a lot of people that need to be working in elder care facilities. That's something that's going to be really on the rise in the next 10 years. If we're worried about what kind of medications are being put into people's bodies, that should be the least of our worries with all the
Amen.
medical care that's being needed with people, whatever age they might be, old, young. But go ahead. Sorry about
Right.
that.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, we had a full-blown interim hearing. An interim hearing is when the legislature is not in session, but they can just have hearings on topics and they have time to kind of go deeper into topics because it's maybe just one or two things that's being heard on a certain agenda as opposed to 20 bills that we're going to try to get through like during the session. So we had an interim hearing the other day all about addressing the healthcare worker shortage in
Yeah.
Texas. And I'm like, pick me. I know, I know what's going on here.
Yeah.
So to your point, you're right. We need more people. We need to be doing everything we can to attract more people to the field.
I want to go into the last two-ish questions. The mainstream media is really pushing hard right now against RFK Jr. I'm at the gym. They got CNN on. They're bringing in all these doctors, bringing out the vaccine talking points against everything in the kitchen sink they're trying to throw at him because they are very worried that President Trump is going to put RFK Jr. in some kind of health care role or some kind of regulatory role where he really can punch some people in the face, which would be good for the country in my mind. Regardless of that, we have seen, and I believe we've talked about this off air and even on air, President Trump say a lot of good things in 2016 and 2020 and even in 2024. And whether he produces on the good things remains to be seen a lot. Or sometimes he talks the talk, but then he kind of doesn't walk the walk. Are you very worried that somebody like RFK Jr., Joseph Ladapo, Florida Surgeon General, who is being floated as Surgeon General of the United States right now, very good. We can talk about how Ron DeSantis
Yeah.
did a great job on that.
Yeah.
Regardless of that, people like those that get into the gut, Peter McCullough, obviously, Robert Malone, the list goes on and on, putting those people into the government, and Donald Trump fails to do that because he gets pressured by none other than Bill Gates, none other than Pfizer donating to his campaign back in 2020. These signs are there. We've seen the talks before, but are they really going to happen? What's your take on this? What are you hearing?
Okay, this is just all, I mean, obviously, all of this is just my opinion, but I will tell you this. Everything that's happened this year just hits different than 2016. I
Okay.
mean, in my opinion, I mean, you don't see Trump sharing the stage with anyone. And then this summer, he's bringing up, Megan Kelly. He's bringing up
Right.
RFK. He's bringing on Elon. He's bringing on Tucker. I mean, this just hits so different. Remember back in 20, maybe this might predate your awakening, Rob, but back in 2015, there was that meeting between Trump and RFK where Trump had kind of promised,
Right. About the
promised him
vaccines.
this vaccine safety commission, and then it quickly fell
Bill
apart. And it
Gates
was
shut it down.
almost easy to think like, well, did it really happen? I mean, of course, I believe it happened, but it wasn't public at all. And Trump never really talked about it either. And so it was just kind of easy to forget about it or dismiss, and or to your point, just be like, oh, he, Pfizer got to him, the pharmaceutical companies got to him, Bill Gates got to him. It was really easy to then point to that $1 million donation, and you're just like, Trump, do better. Like this is the swamp. But so I say all of that and I mean, I will tell you, I mean, warp speed, I still struggle. I still really, really struggle, right? That said, I mean, as far as I know, him and Bobby are still just hanging out at Mar-a-Lago planning the health of America right now as we talk just 1 week after the election. And so when I say it's different, that's kind of like the dichotomy there that I'm really trying to highlight. It's just so different. And I mean, I during the victory speech, I mean, Trump was like, "We're just going to let him have it. Don't touch the oil, but go for it. Have fun, Bobby." And I just again, This just was not things, these, none of this were things that were coming out of his mouth
Mhm.
4 years ago or even 8 years ago. And so I am optimistic. But let's be clear. I mean, I'm the president of Texans for Vaccine Choice. If I didn't daily wake up and choose to be optimistic and joyful, then I would be living in a just cloud of despair because there's just too much corruption and tyranny. And so don't mistake my optimism for being naive, right? Because I understand what we're up against and the forces and the money that we're up against. But I mean, even Trump during, I believe it was his Joe Rogan interview, he talked about how he didn't do a good job of surrounding himself with good advisors the first go around, and that's a lesson he's learned. So, in the face of any other option, I have to believe that we're on the right path here.
Well, I hear you, and I hope you're right. And it does seem different. I agree with you 100% on that. I am a little worried because he is surrounding himself with this is not with the vaccine issue, but with some people like Marco Rubio. I don't think that's the right choice for Secretary of State. We'll see if that's really his choice. But it was a big step by Donald Trump to say, I'm not going to put Nikki Haley, I'm not going to put Mike Pompeo into my cabinet. Two warmongers, two people that actually kind of stiffed him when they were in his administration. So that was a big play there for Donald J. Trump. I do hope you're right, though, because I think Bobby Kennedy Jr., not only on health, but you put him in the FDA, you put him as Attorney General. I mean, this is a guy that has multiple different talents and can do multiple different things at once. Even if, listen, I know Trump has some issues with him on the liquid gold. That's fine. We do need the liquid gold. But Bobby is great on the environment as well. He's, very much about clean water, getting rid of the PFASs. That's a huge thing. The plastics. I mean, these are things that Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives want in their environmental policy. But regardless of that, I just hope you're right because we really could use some Bobby Kennedy and just somebody that's going to go in there and really kick some ass.
There
I'm
is
just, yeah,
nobody that speaks as eloquently and intelligently about agency capture than
right.
Bobby Kennedy. And that is what makes me so optimistic. I mean, to your point, I mean, he's ready to just shake it all up. And nobody should be opposed to clean air and clean water. And we can do both. I mean, it just feels like this new day, this new chapter in America where, we have Elon trying to cut government. Finally, we have, and I do want to just talk about Marco Rubio. When I saw that the other night, I was like, I mean, I kind of had the same reaction as you. I was like, nah, right? But I was watching a news clip of him. I think it was a day or two after the election. It was just some mainstream media talking head, and everything he was saying was spot on. And it was almost, I even said this out loud. I said, I wonder if Trump's victory has somehow enabled him to be who he was all along or given him courage to be bolder. I don't know, but I'm going to just, again, choose to reserve judgment because, I mean, Trump, as far as I'm aware, I mean, he can fire people too. He can bring them
Yeah.
on and he can fire. He's not afraid to say you're fired, right? At least hopefully he won't be this time.
There is some talk, just to put the exclamation point on that comment, that if Marco Rubio does get the Secretary of State job, that yours and my hero for governor, Governor Ron DeSantis, might go to the U.S. Senate. There is talk about this in talks because he's only going to be in there for 2 years. I mean, he would probably win re-election regardless because the Florida Democratic Party is in turmoil. They are just dead. Honestly, they might be worse than the Texas Democratic Party. You never know. Time
That's a
will
funny
tell.
story too. Let me just share this quick little
Sure.
story. The day after the election, the chairman of the Texas Democrats came out and said the reason we lost is because we went too progressive on the border and too progressive on the gender issue. And he got raked over the coals. He had to issue an apology and his
Wow.
resignation the next day. By Friday, last Friday, he issued his resignation. So I guess the moral of the story is that at least as far as the Texas Democrats are involved, they will learn nothing. And that's okay with me.
There was a congressman in Massachusetts called Seth Moulton. He actually said that the same thing about the men and women sports, that I have two girls. We shouldn't be talking about this, pushing this. But these are the same people in Congress. When it came up, every Republican in Congress voted against the bill, and every Democrat, including Seth Moulton, voted for the bill to keep men and women sports, the Equality Act. They're pushing all these transgender agendas. I want to move on with the last comment about this. When we talk about the medical freedom movement, I've seen, big leaps, but I do worry, and I feel like we've spoken about this before, and I've talked to many people about this, Shannon Joy and many other people about this, that the medical freedom movement sometimes becomes fractured because we got people that are for Ron DeSantis and Chip Roy, which I think they're great. I love Chip Roy, by the way. He's trying to put bills for
Yeah,
against the vaccine issue in Congress.
yeah,
They're not going to go anywhere, but that's par for the course. And then we have the people that are the Donald Trump cultists, Donald Trump is Jesus Christ. He will do nothing wrong. And that's kind of, I feel like, where we are in the medical freedom movement. And then we have the con artists that, think they're going to solve everybody's problems with their supplements that they're pushing at the injured like myself. And I can read a lot of these people from a mile away. Some of them are doing, they mean well. A lot of them are just saying this because they're just trying to make a couple of bucks while it's hot right now with the injuries. Anyways, what is your take on the medical freedom movement, how it's grown, and where do you see it, going if, we do have Bobby Kennedy and Donald J. Trump actually pushing this forward?
So, this is mostly, as far as the vaccines go, it is still 99% of the vaccine policy is set at the state level. And so, I was going into Tuesday with the like, Lord, just have mercy on our nation, please. Like, we are so undeserving of your mercy, but we just cannot take another 4 years financially of this, and also just as a leader of TFVC, it's just one of those things where mostly who is in the White House is wholly irrelevant to our work at the state level. But I was like, oh, if we could get, Maha in, it would just, I mean, we would be really kind of off to the races. We would have the wind at our backs as opposed to pushing the boulder up the hill. And so I mean, I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic, at least here at the state level. I'm optimistic that perhaps we could get some more national level fixes to this. I mean, but let's be clear. Even if we get kind of like let's say the 1986, liability shielding law overturned, or we get the PrEP Act overturned, if those things happen, it's only the first step at the state level to come in line. Like it would be a tremendous, huge leap, but it's still just one leap. It's not a magic panacea for all, the pharmaceutical overreach and corruption that we're seeing at the state and local level.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. If they did get rid of the 1986 act, that would put all these pharmaceutical companies out of business right away. Especially, maybe I should just state it like this: it would put Pfizer and Moderna out of business right away because you'd have people suing left and right with the millions of people that have these injuries.
Well, it would, it always depends on how the bill is written, right? Would it be
Fair.
retroactive? Would it be,
True. Good point.
just going forward, future in the future? I don't know. I can't imagine that there'd be any sort of retroactive. That would require a legislature that has a lot of courage. And while I
Yeah.
am optimistic um, about our majorities,
Sure.
it's not a guarantee that they are, full of courage to do the right thing on this
No.
issue. So that said, I don't think it would actually bankrupt anybody overnight, but it would enable us to really put a lot of the coercive and mandated policies to bed at the state level. But as you know, that takes legislation. It doesn't just happen with a magic wand. I mean, it's a lot of work to get bills, drafted, authored, filed, committee hearing. I mean, and then it is a multi-step process. And that's why, organizations like Texans for Vaccine Choice, or wherever you're listening from, find the organization doing the real work and lock arms with them, because when these legislatures gavel in, they're going to need all everybody on deck.
Yeah. Again, Rebecca Hardy, Texans for Vaccine Choice. As we end, I know you do have a podcast, obviously the website. Can you give the audience all that information as we end?
Yes, so the best way to find us is texansforvaccinechoice.com. There's a little sign up button at the top. Poke around on our resources and stuff. We actually are one of the big initiatives that we are doing here as we close out the year and usher in 2025 is a complete revamp of our website. So if you look at it today, go back and look at it in a couple of months, because it is going to be all completely redone and to really reflect the caliber of work that we do here in Texas. And then we do have our podcast called TFVC Shot Callers. We're on Rumble and all sorts of everywhere you listen to podcasts. YouTube, we've had to stop posting because we have our second strike, and if we get a third strike within a certain number of days, our channel is out. So we are minding our P's and Q's on YouTube for a couple more weeks. But other than that, it is on all podcast channels. And we've had some tremendous guests. We've had Aaron Siri and Peter McCullough, Mickey Willis. I mean, there's really and truly something for everyone on our podcast. So dial in, listen in, and join us in the fight.
Again, Rebecca Hardy, again, Texans for Vaccine Choice. Rebecca, thanks so much for always coming on. Thanks so much for being a friend, and keep up the amazing work over in Texas.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me on.